Hello, Pearl Power designers, and welcome to the summit. My name's Natalie Warner. I'm a knitwear designer and clothes making educator who's online at Natalie and Stitches. And today I'm going to teach you a bit about surface pattern design by way of tessellations, which you can use for any kind of knitted texture, cables, lace, they're everywhere where you see a repeating pattern. But today I'm going to teach you how to apply the technique to stranded colour work. So think of like traditional fair art patterns or anything that uses the stranded colourwork technique, but you can also apply it to intarsia as well, depending on how your design goes. So let's get to it. So what we'll cover is what tessellations are, how tessellation symmetry works, and using visual inspiration to create stranded colourwork tessellations. So I'm going to introduce that to you today, as I said in this video, but if you have upgraded to the Yarn Boss toolkit with the bonuses, there'll be another follow-up tutorial to this to show you how to take the technique even further. So if you like this one, I hope you'll think about taking the next one too. So what are tessellations? So a tessellation essentially is a geometric plan or foundation of any surface pattern. So if you think about tiles on the roof or flooring, which also has tiles, lace patterns, so anywhere where a pattern repeats and has a geometric shape as its foundation. And this is in regard to the complexity or simplicity of the pattern. No matter how complex or simple a pattern might look, its success always rests on a seamless repeat of geometric shapes. The shapes might not be apparent when you first look, but I can guarantee you there's always something really simple underneath. Think the basic ones like the circle and triangle and square. And you can even take the square out of that equation because a square is just two triangles stuck together. And with that geometric foundation, the other thing to know is that you can use any geometric shape or combinations of shapes you like, but there's only one rule: no gaps allowed. The pattern must repeat seamlessly without any jogs. And those are the three things that you just need to know about tessellations and what they are. So with that, how can we create tessellations? And to do that, to form a pattern or to repeat a single motif, we need to make copies of the original motif. So by motif, I just mean a tiny unit that repeats itself in some way or another. And this applies to even the most complex shapes. What I'll show you by way of the illustrated example coming up is how repeating that and generating other patterns and altering it in some way, you can create things that look much more complex than they really are. And with that, there are three main techniques for manipulating or making copies of that original motif. We have got translation, which is sliding the motif to another location. So just sliding it from maybe left to right or up and down, anything like that, even diagonal, and that's just translation there. We also have reflection, which is flipping the motif along a linear axis so that it faces in the opposite direction. So basically a mirror image. So if on one side you might have something sliding up to the top left, a reflection, it would be sliding up to the top right. And then finally we have rotation, which is turning the motif around a circular axis so that it forms radial points. So think of the petals of a flower, something like a daisy or a zinnia that has lots of petals organized in a circle around the central bit. That would be rotation symmetry for tessellations. These are the mathematical terms, just so you know, in case you want to do your research away from the presentation today. This is what you type into the search engine to look for. So you can come up with tessellations completely on the fly, as I will begin to do in a few moments. But you can also use photos and other images to design them if you have a particular visual inspiration. You can use any image you like as a starting point. So it doesn't matter whether you think it's a bit odd, it just has to be inspiring to you. That's the only condition. If it's inspiring to you, you'll automatically want to see where your imagination takes you. And in relation to that, you can pick out any detail that catches your eye. You can pick out shapes, colours, textures, anything goes really. And you should always allow yourself the freedom to experiment. Because remember, we're all designers. We're looking for different interpretations of beauty, different perspectives, really inspiring people and encouraging them to see the world in a different way. And we can only do that by giving ourselves the freedom to experiment and be original. So don't worry if what you are looking at, you think it's weird or it's a bit different or no one's done it before. That's the point, honestly, and that's where it becomes really fun and you can enjoy this process so much. So the gift of experimentation is the best thing you can give yourself as a designer. So with that, I'm just going to take you through relatively briefly, because I want to get onto the technique fairly soon, is the tessellation design development for one of my designs called the parquet cowl. So this cowl you can see here, it's a chunky knit and it has a tessellated pattern here. And as you might guess from the name, the pattern was inspired by parquet flooring. And it was the lines of the parquet flooring that I used to create the geometric shape that you see in front of you in the pale blue and chocolate brown yarn. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, this is parquet flooring, and this is one of my favorite architectural features, really. I went to a school where we had parquet flooring in the assembly hall, and I just loved looking at the herringbone textures on the floor. Who knows, I was a very distracted child, and it's always something that stayed with me. I don't have parquet flooring at home, and so I took the opportunity one day to just come up with a design that was inspired by this. So the main things that I picked out from here were the diagonal lines. You can see that it forms kind of like arrowheads. The planks of wood are at right angles, and so I really wanted to pick up on that. I was looking at the thickness of the planks of wood and the thinness of the tiny gaps between them on the floor. And it was with that in mind that I started to experiment with simple diagonal lines to form a motif that would be repeated. So this was my very first go at it. You can see that I've got some thick lines with the dark grey and also with the light grey, and then equally some thin lines with the dark and also with the light. So I was tinkering around with that, seeing what effects that I got. And you'll know that I'm just keeping it relatively simple. It's just straight lines. But what I have tried to do is bring in some of that reflection symmetry that I mentioned a moment or two ago. So you can see that it's forming that V shape and trying to capture that right angle that I saw on the floor. And that was the first step with the tessellation symmetry. I've just flipped it along a vertical axis and done that 2 times. So I've got one pair on the left and one pair on the right. And this was my starting point. I wanted to move on from this though, because this was not very nice to knit. One tip for designing knitted tessellations is that the more axes of symmetry you can get into the pattern, the easier it will be for you to knit, and the easier it will be for you to memorize the pattern as well. You can get into a lovely rhythm with it, say when you have 3 and 1 and 3 and 1. And this did not have that. It looks okay, it was a starting point, but I knew that I would not want to knit this into anything larger. So with that, I decided to simplify things even more and came up with this one. Now, I made the motif smaller. It's about half the size of the previous one. And I kept up the thick and the thin. I kept on the thick dark and the thick light, and then the thin dark as well. But what I did here was keep up the reflection symmetry. So you can see it's still flipped from right to left. But I've also brought in the rotation symmetry as well. So you can see that by doing that, I have just put a little dark cross in the middle, and then around that I have just rotated the straight diagonal lines. They're still at sort of 90 degrees like they were originally, but they've all gone around a point, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that was it for parquet. I just had that single motif, and I needed to actually simplify it to get the most out of this design. And then with that, the cowl was born, and this was much nicer to knit, let me tell you. So this is a wider shot of the development work that I did for Parquet, and I'm just going to start in the bottom right hand corner just because that's how the papers have come out. And so what I began with was by just doing little sketches of the details that I picked out from the Parquet flooring. We've got the thick and the thin lines here, just where I've got the cursor. And if we skip over to the bottom left, we have got the thick and thins that we had for the grey swatch when I was developing that idea. The top left is something that I did not bother knitting because I knew that if I didn't like the one on the bottom left, I was not going to like this one. And also, again, note that there's barely any symmetry about this pattern at all. So that's kind of how I knew that it was not going to work out for me. And then finally, in the top right, this is the final design for the cowl that you can see there. And that was much nicer to knit. It's got tons of symmetry. It doesn't matter which direction you go, vertical, horizontal, diagonal. It just works really beautifully. And here again, just to show it on a wider scale, is that you can see that, you know, it's just a simple shape, but it's the repetition and the scaling that makes it look much more complex than it really is. And now that you know how I did it, I hope that this inspires you to go on and create your own. All you need is a pencil and some squared paper, and again, just imagination and experimentation. Just pick out anything at all that you find interesting. And then back to the main image. So, yeah, you know exactly how I did it. This is how the final product looked, and it is one of my favorite designs today, years after I produced it. So more tips just before, this is the last bit before I go on to the overhead camera, about tessellations. So I've just mentioned one. Dotted and squared paper is very helpful in working out the plan, because the grid formation helps you to keep stitches in mind. You can just colour in the squares, but the paper is plain enough for you to just draw with freedom. So you can doodle freely like I did on the bottom right corner when I had just the lines on, but you can also do that in conjunction with squared paper. And because you use the square paper or the dot grid, it just means that you've practically got the Colourwork chart done already. And you can take that forward into the design of your own knitting pattern. Or you can get rid of the doodling stage and work directly onto the squared or dotted paper. Whichever one works. As long as you've got pencil and paper, you'll be absolutely fine. That's all you need to do any of this. The only thing I would say from a practical standpoint is just give yourself plenty of space around your original starting point, because remember, with tessellations you want to be able to slide the original motif in any direction. You want to be able to go up, down, left, right, diagonal. And if you start in the center of the paper, if you start in the corner of the paper, I beg your pardon, you won't be able to do that. You'll only be able to go in a few directions. So start in the middle and then grow outwards from there. That's the best way. Hello, yes, this is me. I'm the one who's been behind all the slides. So now that I've given you all the theory behind how to design tessellations, I'm going to turn the camera back round so that you have a desk view, and I'm going to show you one way that you can get started with designing your own tessellations. So here we go. Okay, so I've turned the camera back round so you can see my desk. And this is the squared paper that I generally tend to use for tessellations. If you're on the metric system, this paper is 0.5 centimetre or 5mm squared. If you're in the US or prefer inches, then you want to get quadrille paper, which is 1/4 inch, which is about the same size. And I like this one just because it's very easy to see what you're doing. So in this demo, I'm just going to use some rotation symmetry for you. And I'm just going to pick a very simple geometric shape. So just remember that many tessellations, whether they're used from an inspiration image or not, can usually boil down to a geometric shape. So with that in mind, I'm just going to pick a center point around which to rotate my shape. I'm just going to mark that out by drawing a square. And then from this square, I'm just going to extend upward just to do the top to begin with, to create a diamond kind of shape. So I'm just going to draw a diamond of sorts, and I'm just going to work systematically going all around, because that helps me to stay out of trouble. I have been known to do what I believe is a copy of a shape and then realize it's actually not a copy at all. So I'm just going to do one. So let's say this is north or just the top, just for the sake of argument. So I'm going to do one, and then I'm going to move across east and do another one. So I've rotated this diamond motif through 90 degrees. So there, the symmetry is already coming about generally. So however you move the motif or the shape, whether it's translated or reflected or rotated, that's building in the symmetry that you need for the tessellation or the repeating pattern to work. So I've just done one. I'm just going to do another square here so that it's symmetrical at either end, and then just do another diamond at the bottom. And you don't have to be particularly neat here either. Remember, you're just generating ideas, and once you have got something in mind or something that you want to take on to the next stage, you can always tidy up later. So try not to edit as you go with this. Just draw as freely as you can. Remember that the key is experimentation, and see what comes out of it. So just going to start doing the last diamond here. And at the same time, I'm just going to start building outwards from this center spot. So I'm keeping it quite large. I mean, you can use smaller squared paper if you want to. If you do, then I would say about 2.5 millimeters, or maybe 1/8 of an inch, if you can get that. And that can be really handy for experimenting with the scale of your tessellation as well. So I'll show you that really quickly, actually, just so that you can see how that looks in comparison to this. So yeah, you can see it's a lot smaller, but if you're going to design something quite large like a jumper or sweater or cardigan, then redrawing it can give you an idea of how that looks across a big piece, and also can give you some cues about the width of the yarn you might want to use. Some designs might look better in a 4-ply yarn than they do in a chunky, for example, whereas with some others it might not matter. But the main thing is that you can see what you're likely to get and how the design works. So I'm just going to keep filling this in, and I'm just keeping on rotating the shape. I'm just maintaining the consistency of the rotation. So I'm just taking another square as my starting point, and then because this is a repetition of the same shape, just in a different orientation, I am just using what I've already drawn as a guide for developing the tessellation. So this is why I find it helpful to just go one at a time systematically around. And I'll just do a few more. And then you can see here how it's building up already. And once I complete a circuit, if you will, you can also see that even though I'm drawing diamonds, you can see other shapes forming in the space, or the gaps, the negative space, whatever you might want to call it, between each one. And I'm just going to fill one in for you now, actually, and these can be just as fascinating as what you originally intended to work with. You can see that we've got a kind of X or cross shape forming between the diamonds. And so when you're designing a tessellation, it can be really fascinating to see what else comes to your eye as you're drawing. You have your mind on one thing, and then something else jumps out at you and inspires you, and you might never have seen it had you not tried to experiment in this way. And so that is part of the fun, honestly. So again, just
all this does is go back to my original point in the slides about just giving yourself the freedom to experiment. Don't police yourself, don't edit yourself, just play. Play and draw and enjoy. I can tell you this is a lot of fun. I absolutely love doing this. And I hope that you will too after seeing this presentation. Kudos to you if you've already placed an order for some squared paper. So I'm just going to keep going. Yeah. And yeah, we're just going to come up to the top. I might not be able to fit all of it in, but I'll just do enough so that we get the idea and we get the profile of the shape that we're building. So there's at least a partial diamond there, just to make it feel a bit more complete at the top. But what I would do here, and this will be what I go on to develop in the next video if you've got the Yarn Boss toolkit, is how you can use the different sizes of squared paper to bring your ideas on, and also different ways that you can fill in the shapes. I mean, I haven't applied any colour yet, but once I've finished, that's something that you can do in your own time. You can decide which bits you want to colour in, whether you want to colour in the X's or the diamonds, and just see what jumps out of you. There are so many ways that you can work with this basic shape, and they will just take you on another journey from this basic plan that we've got here, way beyond what you might have imagined. So I'm just going to stop there and show you. So there's the rotation symmetry. We started with this bit at the centre and went northeast, southwest, and I've just built up around it as well. And I could obviously fill in the page. This is the joy of working in the middle. You can just build out and then you'll see all sorts of things taking shape. But yes, that is an introduction to the tessellation technique. So we have got rotation symmetry as an example, using the three main types of tessellation symmetry we mentioned earlier, and I've just rotated those around a point and expanded outwards so that we've got a more complex repeating shape.
So it just remains for me to say thank you very much for coming along today and watching my Tessellations presentation. This is part one. I'm going to go into much more depth with this in part two, which is in the upgraded Yarn Boss toolkit. And if you like this and love the idea of learning more about knitwear design, you can follow or sign up to my newsletter, take short courses, and read more on my blog. I've got nearly 100 posts on there at natalieinstitches.com. But in the meantime, happy designing. I really hope you enjoy this technique. Please let me know if you try it out. You can just tag me at natalieinstitches on Instagram or just send me a message. And yeah, I wish you all the best with your stranded colourwork tessellation designs.